Written and directed by Brad Bird, this 2004 Pixar movie was a big hit, and just like I did with Toy Story, I will be going down the history of the making of this movie. Brad Bird's first feature film, The Iron Giant, had bombed at the box office, which is crazy to me because it's one of my favorite movies. Later, for The Incredibles, he pitched it to Pixar and brought most of his team that worked on The Iron Giant with him. As they developed new systems, because this was the first Pixar movie that really focused on human characters, they had to make more complex models. The animation team was tasked with animating an all-human cast, which required creating new technology to animate detailed human anatomy, clothing, and realistic skin and hair. The film premiered at the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles on the 24th of October 2004. Later, it was released to theaters on November 5th the same year. It ended up earning $632 million worldwide as it finished its theatrical run, resulting in it becoming the fourth highest grossing film of 2004. The earliest development for this story dates back to 1993 when Bird sketched the family during an uncertain part in his film career. As he pondered the idea, he had signed a production deal with Warner Bros. Feature Animation and was in the process of directing his first feature film, The Iron Giant. With high aspirations as Bird approached middle age, he started to wonder if his career goals were attainable at the price of his family life. With the flop of The Iron Giant at the box office, he gravitated more towards his superhero story. Consciously, this was just a funny movie about superheroes, but I think that what was going on in my life definitely filtered into the movie. A quote from Brad Bird. Initially, just as the Iron Giant had been created, he wanted The Incredibles to be animated two-dimensionally cel-shaded. But when the Iron Giant bombed, he reconnected with an old friend, John Lasseter, and pitched the superhero story idea to him in March of 2000. They both had known each other from their years at CalArts in the 1970s. Lasseter was sold on the idea on May 4th, 2000. Bird signed a multi-film contract with the studio. Not only did he direct The Incredibles, but later he directed my personal favorite Pixar film, Ratatouille. It was also unusual for a Pixar film to have Brad Bird solely directing and writing the project, as they usually had 2 to 3 working on one production. Bird came to Pixar with the lineup of the story's family members worked out. A mom and dad, both suffering through the dad's midlife crisis, a shy teenage girl, a cocky 10-year-old boy, and a baby. Bird had based their powers on family archetypes. During production, Hayao Miyazaki came to the studio and saw the film's story reels. Bird has asked Miyazaki if the reels had made any sense or if it was just quote-unquote American nonsense. Miyazaki replied through an interpreter, "I think it's a very adventurous thing you are trying to do in an American film." Fun fact, Syndrome, who happens to be my favorite Pixar villain, was meant to be a minor character who dies almost immediately at the beginning of the story. And a second fun fact, Syndrome, at least the way he looks, was designed after how Brad Bird himself looks. Craig T. Nelson had never done voice acting before, but considered the role when he rewatched The Iron Giant. I mean, I don't blame him, it's an inspiring movie. Holly Hunter had also never voiced an animated character up until that point either, and saw the opportunity as an exciting way to expand her repertoire. Sarah Vowell was unexpectedly asked by Bird to voice Violet in the film after he had heard her voice on the National Public Radio program This American Life and thought she was perfect for the role. Spencer Fox was asked to voice Dash Parr, and it was also his feature film debut. Bird wanted Dash to have a realistic, out-of-breath sort of voice at times, example, like when he was being chased in the jungle. So he had Fox run laps around the studio until he was tired enough for it to be believable when those moments would come up in the script. For Frozone, Bird knew he wanted this particular character to have the coolest voice, so he got Samuel L. Jackson to voice him. Bird had originally considered Lily Tomlin to voice Edna Mode, but after she declined later on, he took on the role himself. Brad Bird brought a core group of animators who worked on The Iron Giant with him to work on The Incredibles. Since they were transitioning from The Iron Giant to Pixar Animation Studios, many of them had to learn about and make the shift from 2D to 3D animation, including Bird himself. Bird found working on CGI wonderfully malleable in a way that traditional animation is not, calling the camera's ability to easily switch angles in a given scene marvelously adaptable. Also, he found computer animation to be difficult in a different way than working on animation traditionally, because the software was sophisticated but not particularly friendly. I just have to say this real quick. I like learning about all this and reading this for this video, like it makes me just want to be able to time travel and see what this was like back then. Okay, sidetrack over. Let's continue. With how the script was written, as Bird was unaware of the limitations or concerns that went hand in hand with computer animation, this was the most complex film that Pixar had worked on thus far in their run as a company. Teddy Fusile and Teddy Newton, who were two artists Bird had brought with him from Warner Bros., were in charge of designing the film's characters. Like most computer animated films, The Incredibles had a year-long period of building the film from the inside out, modeling the exterior and understanding controls that would work the face and body, the articulation of the character before the animation could even begin. They tried to emphasize the graphic quality of good 2D animation to the Pixar team, who had only worked primarily in CGI. Bird attempted to incorporate teaching from Disney's Nine Old Men that the crew at Pixar had never really emphasized. The film's human characters posed a difficult set of challenges. It was widely agreed on that humans were one of the most difficult things to execute well in animation, and this being Pixar's first movie focused on humans was going to be a huge challenge to work through. Pixar's animators filmed themselves walking to better grasp proper human motion. With an all-human character cast, Pixar had to develop new animation systems and techniques to get it to work. Luckily, with Monsters Inc., they had some semblance and reference for animating a type of hair and cloth, but the amount of variety for those that they needed for The Incredibles had never been done up to this point in the company's history. Another thing that added that we should all be grateful for was Bird did not tolerate any compromises for the sake of this movie and technical simplicity. This shows he was passionate, this shows dedication. Without a leader like that, imagine how The Incredibles could have turned out. And possibly Ratatouille too. Violet's long hair, which obscured half her face, which was integral to her character, was extremely difficult to animate, and they only successfully did it towards the end of the production period of this movie. In addition, the animators had to figure out how to animate hair underwater and blowing through the wind, another challenge, but one they definitely worked hard on and succeeded for the debut of this technique. Disney was initially reluctant to make this film due to the issues and challenges, and they thought a live action would suit the idea better, but John Lasseter said no. The Incredibles was everything that computer generated animation had trouble doing. It had human characters, it had hair, it had water, it had fire, it had a massive number of sets. The creative heads were excited about the idea of the film, but once I showed the story reels of exactly what I wanted, the technical teams turned white. They took one look and thought, this will take 10 years and cost $500 million. How are we possibly going to do this? So I said, give us the black sheep. I want artists who are frustrated. I want the ones who have another way of doing things that nobody's listening to. Give us all the guys who are probably headed out the door. A lot of them were malcontents because they saw different ways of doing things, but there was a little opportunity to try them, since the established way was working very, very well. And we gave the black sheep a chance to prove their theories. And we changed the way a number of things are done here. For less money per minute than was spent on the previous film, Finding Nemo, we did a movie that had 3 times the number of sets and had everything that was hard to do. All this because the heads of Pixar gave us leave to try crazy ideas. Bradford speaking to McKinsey Quarterly in 2008. Now, I know I've been going on and on about how hard it was to animate humans at the time, but there were more challenges that proved themselves in the process of making this film. The story was bigger than any prior story in the studio, the runtime was longer than any of the movies they had worked on thus far, and there were 4 times the amount of sets that they had previously worked on for one of those singular movies. This was a big project, everyone knew it, and thank goodness everyone had the courage to persevere because this ended up being such a good movie and such an inspiring story behind the making of it. Rick Sayre the supervising technical director, had mentioned that the hardest thing while working on this film was nothing could be chalked up to being the hardest thing. There were a lot of challenges, and none of them should be propped up over the others or compared to in a way like that. Animating fire, water, air, smoke, steam, and explosions were all additional to the new difficulty of working with humans. Sayuri said the team adopted the name or title Alpha Omega, where one team was concerned about building, modeling, shading, and layout, while another dealt with the final camera, lighting, and effects. Another team, dubbed the Character Team, digitally sculpted, rigged, and shaded all the characters, and a simulation team was responsible for developing simulation technology for the hair and clothing. There were at least 781 visual effect shots in the film, and they were quite often visual gags, such as the window shattering when Bob angrily shuts the car door. Additionally, the effects team improved their modeling of clouds using volumetric rendering for the first time. The animators had implemented a new technique to make the skin of the characters feel more real. This was done to mimic subsurface scattering, which is a mechanism of light transport in which light that penetrates the surface of a translucent object is scattered by interacting with the material and exits the surface potentially at a different point. Another challenge that arose, which was predicted to likely take 2 months or possibly more, of precious time to work out towards the end of the most critical stages of production time Pixar had, was figuring out how to animate one of Jack Jack's scenes at the end of the movie. This is a scene where Jack Jack turns into different substances and transformations, and one of them is him turning into a sort of goo. Technical directors petitioned the film's producer, John Walker, who Bird had brought from Warner Bros. For more time. Bird had also insisted that the storyboards define the blocking of characters' motions, lighting, and character movements, which had previously been left to other departments rather than storyboarded. Bird admitted that he had the knees of the studio trembling under the weight of The Incredibles, but called the film a testament to the talent of the animators at Pixar, who were admiring the challenges of the film provoked. He recalled, basically, I came into a wonderful studio, frightened a lot of people with how many presents I wanted for Christmas, and then got almost everything I asked for. The Incredibles was the first Pixar film to be scored by Michael Giacchino. Bird has specifically been looking for someone who would make music that was inspired by the superheroes' retro-futuristic design, the future as seen from the 1960s. John Barry was the first choice to make music for the film score. The trailer of the film had been given a re-recording of Barry's theme to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. However, Barry did not wish to duplicate the sound of his earlier soundtrack, so the assignment was then given to Giacchino. The score was recorded on analog tapes as Giacchino felt it would give the music an old feel, as Bird had requested. After he took notes listening to 1960s music and realizing the differences between music of the present and music of the past. Dan Wallen, the recording engineer, noted that brass instruments, which are at the forefront of the film's score, sound better on analog equipment rather than digital. Wallen came from an era in which music was recorded, according to Giacchino, the right way, which consists of everyone in the same room playing against each other and feeding off each other's energy. Many of Giacchino's works going forward followed this way of making music almost the same or very similarly. A teaser trailer of The Incredibles premiered on May 30th, 2003, over a year before its release, and was attached to the screenings of Finding Nemo. I won't go over all the marketable products that were released, but there are a few numerous companies such as McDonald's, Tide, Downy, Bounce, etc. that helped advertise the film with their brands. Dark Horse Comics released a limited series of comic books based on the film. Hasbro produced a series of action figures and toys based on the film. Kellogg's released a series of The Incredibles themed cereal, as well as promotional Pop-Tarts and fruit snacks, all proclaiming as Incrediberry Blast of flavor. In July of 2008, almost 4 years after The Incredibles came out, it was announced that a series of comic books would be made based on the film, published by Boom Studios in collaboration with Disney Publishing by the end of the year. The first issues of the series was titled The Incredibles Family Matters by Mark Waid and Marcio Takara, which was published from March to June of 2009 the following year. The Incredibles was released on November 5th, 2004. It was also accompanied by a short film titled Bounding, which came out in 2003. Its release also included a sneak peek at Cars and Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith. While Pixar celebrated another triumph with The Incredibles, Steve Jobs was embroiled in a public feud with the head of its distribution partner, the Walt Disney Company. This would eventually lead to the outscene of Michael Eisner and Disney's acquisition of Pixar the following year. 2004 was about the time Disney started blaming Pixar and 3D animation for the fact their new movies were doing so poorly, but really it was just that most of the straight-to-DVD movies were poorly planned out and made, or just made because they were greedy and thought it would make them a quick buck. However, as we all know, Pixar is now associated with Disney, so the feud ended in 2006 when Disney, now under the leadership of Bob Iger, brought Pixar back for $7.4 billion. John Lasseter also became the head of Disney Animation. When Incredibles 2 was released, the original movie was re-released and digitally remastered for IMAX theaters using a DMR technology as a double feature on June 14, 2018. As a part of Disney's 100th anniversary, The Incredibles was re-released between September 1st and the 14th of 2023 in the United States and October 5th to the 11th in Latin America. The Incredibles earned $261.4 million in the United States and Canada and $370.1 million over in other territories. That adds up to $631.6 million worldwide. It was the fourth highest grossing film of 2004 behind Shrek 2, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Spider-Man 2, which honestly I understand 2004 seemed to be a really great year for movies, so it's fair that it was number 4 because all those ones I could see also being in the top 4. So with that, there are a few things to take away and learn. Sure, it's fun to know these fun facts and bring them up when your friends are talking about Pixar and movies like The Incredibles, but as I researched this, some thoughts came to mind. Something that maybe I could learn from, and maybe even some of you watching could take away something inspiring. First off, when things start to seem like they're hopeless, either in your creative pursuits or even any part of your life, keep going, keep trekking along. If it seems like it'll take longer than you want, keep going because the time will pass anyway. It would be a shame if you get to that point where you could have had something done, but because you told yourself you didn't want to take too long, you didn't finish it. Another point is to make the impossible possible. The Incredibles had so many roadblocks, so many things that seemed impossible, and the team still pulled through and not only made something great, but paved the way to keep making great things. They weren't the first people to include humans in an animated movie, but they did improve upon the knowledge of the animators before them for the focus of the movie. Even if you're not the first one to do something, you're the first person to do things your way. With that, I'll sign up for the day. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it inspired you in some way. I'll see you later.